In this lesson, we're going to look at a real piece of writing from a real student for the Writing Task 2 question you can see on the screen right now. We're going to talk about what the student did well and what they can improve on. At the end of the lesson, we will talk about the band score. So let's have a look at this question. So it says you should spend about 40 minutes on this task, okay? Write about the following topic. Pretty simple. So some people think that trees should be planted in vacant areas in towns and cities, while others say homes should be built instead. Discuss both points of view and give your own opinion. Okay, so the first thing to mention there is that there are two things you need to do. You need to discuss both points of view. Okay, that's number one. And you also need to give your own opinion. You need to make your opinion clear. If you don't do both of these things, well, you're not going to get a high band score for task response. Now, the next thing to talk about is that it says both points of view. Okay, right here, both points of view. What does that mean? Well, the first view is up here. It says some people think that trees should be planted in vacant areas in towns and cities. That is the first view. The second view is just after that. It says, while others say homes should be built instead. So that is the second view. So for the writer to score high in task response, they need to talk about both of those things. All right, so on the screen now, you can see the answer from the student. So let's go through it paragraph by paragraph. Let's start with the introduction. So growing trees is extremely beneficial for the environment. Okay, fair enough. So it looks like this sentence is telling us the topic of the essay. Yet there is a contrasting argument regarding this. Okay, this just seems a bit funny. Contrasting argument, just one, that doesn't seem very natural. So I think the student should perhaps rephrase that, write it in a different way. Let's look at the next sentence. Some claim that trees should be planted in towns and cities where there are unoccupied spaces. Okay, well, that's clearly talking about the first view, planted in towns and cities. So that's great. The student's talking about the first view. Let's keep reading. Whereas others argue, okay, the second view, that those areas should instead be used for constructing homes. That is the second view there, which is really, really good. The student has talked about both views. Now, just in regards to this word here, instead, I think it would be better if the word instead was put at the end of this sentence, but that's just a small minor thing. Let's keep reading now. In my opinion, these areas should be used for building residential areas, as this is where crowds live in, where it could provide more benefits. Okay, so there's a little bit to talk about there. The first thing is the student has given their opinion. Okay, that is fantastic, because to get a high band score for task response, you need to give your opinion and you need to make it clear what you think. However, the way they have written this sentence is a bit funny because they've used the wrong word. They've said, this is where crowds live. Well, crowd is not the right word to use that. So I'll put WW for wrong word. And it just seems a bit awkward here. Live in where? So again, I think the student should rephrase that. Yeah, it just doesn't really make sense. Sorry, let me remove that. I'll put it down here, rephrase, and I'll just put an arrow there. It just doesn't really make sense. Crowds live in where it could provide. And the next thing I'm thinking is, what is it? What is it talking about? Is it talking about the crowds? Is it talking about building residential areas? Let's keep going. This essay will discuss both views regarding these contrasting claims. Well, I like that sentence. I think that's really good because it's clearly telling the reader what is going to be in the essay. So I'll put a tick there. So overall, I think the introduction is okay. The writer clearly tells the reader what they're going to talk about. They talk about both views, okay, view number one, and then this second view of constructing homes, and they give their opinion. So I think it's a nice introduction. It might be a little bit long, and there are just a few things that need to be changed, like we talked about. Let's move on now to the second paragraph, which is the first body paragraph. So let's have a look and see what the student is going to focus on here. On one hand, there are several factors that contribute to why trees should be planted in city areas. Okay, I think that's quite nice. It's a topic sentence which is telling the reader that they're going to talk about factors that contribute to why trees should be planted in city areas. And also, just be careful of phrases like this, because phrases like this are a bit mechanical, a bit unnatural when you use a lot of them. So we'll continue and see how the writer explains their ideas now. By planting trees in the city, well, the first thing that I notice there is that the writer has used a nice grammar structure, by plus verb ing. So that's a big tick. There will be a great amount of oxygen released into the atmosphere, enhancing the physical well-beings of citizens residing in those areas. So a really nice sentence. Just a few things to mention. The first thing I can see is that the writer has used some higher level vocabulary: oxygen, atmosphere, enhance, physical well-being, citizen, residing. So this is clearly showing that the writer is not a band 6 for their vocabulary. So right now, I'm just in regards to the vocabulary, I'm feeling a band 7. However, there is a mistake that I can see. The first one is just here, okay, physical well-beings. Okay, it shouldn't be well-beings. It should just be physical well-being. And yeah, I think there's only one mistake there, just that S. And just something to note, this is a great grammar structure, okay, comma plus ing. And that is a grammar structure that you often see that ChatGPT uses. All right, let's keep reading and we'll see what the writer says next. Everyone. Oh, sorry, there was one other thing I wanted to say. This word here, will. The writer has some really nice vocabulary, but they say will. Will is a very basic and general word, and will means something will happen 100%. It will definitely happen. But in this case, we don't know that this will happen. If you just plant 2 or 3 trees, well, no, there's not going to be a great amount of oxygen released. So just be careful of that. In regards to the word will, try and use some alternatives like may or likely or potentially. All right, let's keep going to that next sentence. Everyone would be able. So again, would. They're making these definite claims that, this will happen 100%. Would be able to breathe freely without having the concern of toxic molecules like the PM 2.5. Well, there's a small mistake there. Okay, we don't need to say the. And just the word like, I'm just going to write INF. It just seems a little bit informal, and I don't normally recommend that my students use like when they're writing. Like is more suitable for speaking. Now, just another thing to mention, this bit here, having the concern, I think it would be much more natural to say without being concerned regarding or about toxic molecules like PM 2.5. Let's keep reading now. It can also reduce the amount of carbon emissions from cars being produced, as plants would absorb those carbon dioxide molecules. So again, some nice vocabulary here. Okay, carbon emissions, produced, Absorb, that's a word that most students probably wouldn't use in a task 2 essay. And carbon dioxide molecules. Just going back to this word here, I'm not really sure what it's talking about. Is it talking about PM 2.5 or is it talking about something else? I'm not really sure here. Now, let's continue with the last sentence. This could help improve the quality of lives of people around those spaces. Well, the first thing to mention there is there's a nice use of referencing. Okay, referencing is important when it comes to your coherence and cohesion band score. So overall, I think this paragraph is quite nice. There is some nice vocabulary, there's some nice grammar, but there are some little mistakes that we have already discussed. So let's move on to the next paragraph and we'll see what the writer's going to talk about. So on the other hand, okay, nice, that's telling the reader that now they're going to move on to something different, building homes instead in those vacant areas. That just sounds a little bit awkward, so I think the writer should change that. Also consists of numerous reasons to why it is a good idea. Yeah, so again, this just doesn't seem very natural. I think the writer would be better to use a different word. And also they've said consists of numerous reasons to why. We will need to say as to why it is a good idea. Now just look at this word here, good, okay, good idea. The student has used some fantastic vocab, factors, contribute, oxygen, reside, citizens, and then they have used the word good. So I would advise the student to not use the word good and say something else. Use a more professional word because obviously good is a very basic, common word. So let's keep reading and see what the student says next. Cities are known to be extremely crowded, where a lot of people struggle to find places to live in. Okay, fine. The grammar is correct there. There's a nice use of the word struggle there. This issue can be solved by building more houses so that every citizen has a place to reside in. Well, just be careful with the word so. So generally shouldn't be used in formal academic writing. And just looking at the final few words, it just seems a little bit not 100% natural. Every citizen has a place to reside in. A place to reside in doesn't really sound very natural, so it's probably better for the student to use a different word here. It can also encourage for more tourists and foreigners. Okay, we wouldn't say for. I would say it can also encourage more tourists and foreigners to choose to live in a country, supporting and improving the country's economy. Now, just going back here to this main idea here, I just don't think it is developed enough. I think the writer should support this idea more, and this is going to help to improve the task response band score. It can also encourage for more tourists, we've already read that, when there are more tourists willing to purchase our goods. Well, I don't know what our goods means. Which goods are you talking about? Local citizens would be able to earn more money and live more comfortable lives. Yeah, that support, it just seems very general, and I feel like the student could develop it more and support it even more with specific examples. It's just very general. Local citizens would be able to earn more money and live more comfortable lives. Well, how? Why? Give an example. It's just very general. So yeah, this paragraph's okay. I think the first body paragraph was better because this second paragraph here, it just doesn't have enough support. And that's an important part of getting a high band score for task response. You need to support, you need to develop, you need to really explain your ideas. So yeah, just remember that when you're writing your writing task 2. Now let's move on to the final paragraph, which is the conclusion. In conclusion, there are contrasting claims on whether free spaces in towns and cities should be used for planting trees or for constructing residential areas. So what I noticed straight away there is this sentence is very similar to the introduction. And that's something that a lot of students get wrong. They think that the introduction and conclusion should be similar. Well, yes and no. Most of the time, there should be a clear difference between the introduction and conclusion, because the conclusion is there to finish the essay. It's not there to open the essay. And this just looks very similar to up above here, where the student wrote their introduction and where they introduced or they started the essay. So just remember that the introduction and conclusion should be different. Growing trees can help reduce the carbon emissions, well, not just carbon emissions, and release more oxygen to surrounding areas, while building homes could provide people with a place to live in. Okay, so I think the writer is trying to summarize their main ideas there. However, from my point of view, okay, so the writer is talking about their opinion. Building homes is better and could be more useful for cities. Nonetheless, trees should still be grown, maybe not in large vacant areas, but in rather small spaces. I think that word rather shouldn't be there. Small spaces in homes, providing a safe and healthy environment for present and future generations to live in. So a nice sentence there. I understand what the student is trying to do. They're trying to write a long, complex sentence to show they have a higher level of grammar, which is nice. However, if we look here, this conclusion is how many lines? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then if we go back to body 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So do you see the problem there? The conclusion is too long. Some of those words should be put into body paragraph 2 or even body paragraph 1 to support the main ideas more, because that was one of the issues with body paragraph 2. The support was just very general. It needed to go deeper to improve the task response. So, but overall, the conclusion, it's okay. It clearly says the writer's opinion, which is really, really important from my point of view. However, I just think it's too long. Now, let's go down and score this essay. So for task response, it definitely answered the question. There was a clear opinion. There was some support, but I just don't think it was enough to get to that band 7 level. I think it was quite general. I think it could have, or it should have gone much deeper. So I'm going to award a 6 for the task response there. Now, for coherence and cohesion, I think it flowed quite nicely. One example of this is the student used referencing. So for example, this and up here as well, like we talked about. It doesn't seem mechanical. It flows quite nicely from one sentence to the next, from one paragraph to the next. So for me, I'm going to award this a 7 for coherence and cohesion. For lexical resource, this one is definitely going to be a 7 for me because there was some less common vocabulary. However, there was also a bit of basic vocabulary where the writer could have used a wider range of vocabulary. So I just don't think I don't think the writer had a wide enough range of vocabulary to get to that band 8. Now, when it comes to grammar, this is a tough one. It's sort of between a 6 and a 7, but either way, it's not going to matter because the overall band score is still going to be a 6.5. So I think I'm going to award it a 7, but like I said, it could really be a 6 or a 7. There were some different grammar structures, but there were also some mistakes as well. So overall, this essay would score an overall band score of 6.5. So to improve for next time, I would advise the student to really focus on their task response and really support their ideas, really develop what they're saying and give much more support and write a smaller or a shorter conclusion.